Hello, and thank you for watching the short subject Cognitive Security Primer. I felt it was necessary to do this because we see an increasing number of brands and products and companies talking about cognitive security or behavioral analytics, and a lot of times they confuse them and state that they're doing one thing when they're really not. So let's talk about what cognitive actually is. Now, most people, when you think of cognitive or cognitive computing, a lot of people will go to Watson, and everybody, when they think of Watson, they typically think of Jeopardy, where Watson won Jeopardy. Well, in the enterprise construct, what happens if Watson can really answer your million-dollar question, which is, this organization is most likely to target your company in a cyber attack campaign today? Now, that's the type of thing that you're not going to get from behavioral analytics or security analytics, because both of those things are predicated on events that have already taken place and correlating them together to produce some sort of results. The challenge is, how do you indicate from a predictive standpoint that you may be under potential threat? Well, the way you do that is you look at all of the information that's living out in the ether, and a lot of that is in the form of unstructured data. Unstructured data is exactly the medium I'm using to communicate with you. It is natural language. It doesn't matter what language it is, but it is spoken or written or visual imagery, and all of that is unstructured. And what we're seeing is, in every single industry, unstructured data is absolutely exploding. And we see significant growth in those areas, categorically. So you have all of this data that lives in this unstructured block. Now, the problem is you also have this traditional security system or collection mechanism, and the two are just simply not compatible. You cannot fix this problem by adapting, because you would have to then convert the unstructured data into structured data, and you would lose its meaning. So it is like trying to fit, quite literally, a square peg into a round hole. So how do we deal with unstructured data? It is important to security because it describes intent and emotion. It looks at content of information. It looks at all of the things that are intangible, or really you can't get a standard grip around from a pure 0 and 1 standpoint. Now let's look at why this unstructured data is also so important in an enterprise. Now, in a traditional enterprise, you have a group of security operators or an IT organization that is responsible for the protection of the enterprise, and they believe that they have protected their information assets, and they have effectively created, through security posture and governance, a giant maze for a bad actor to try and get through. And so they're sitting there with the protected information, and the bad actor is out there trying to weed his way or her way through the environment to get to that information. So let's look at what's actually happening. From an enterprise management perspective, they perceive all of these actions as a set of logs, as a set of structured data, because that's all they can see. But the reality of it is, this bad actor is doing a lot of research and taking action with all the information they're retrieving and selling. And all of this is happening in the unstructured world. And it's doing so in natural language and in a way that the security environment can't see and the typical security telemetry systems can't see. So the reality of it is while most enterprises feel like they have their data well protected and they've created this giant maze, the reality is just the opposite. The bad actors know exactly what they're after and how they're going to get it and who they're going to use to get it. And the maze is between the IT and security teams and the sensitive information within those teams' own environment, because they have to go through all the different organizations and internal business units. They have to go through their own politics, process, and procedure. They have to look at the information that they are confined to based on the security posture and architecture they've implemented. They have to navigate all of this to try and pinpoint that one piece of information the bad actor has already decided to target. So the challenge here is, how do you enable or better equip the security and IT teams in an organization to deal with this scenario, which is far more a reality than the reverse? Well, the answer is the first thing you have to do is you have to be able to create free association. You have to be able to look at documents and materials within an environment, all the different people that can interact with them, the people that are talking or interacting with your corporation or around your corporation, and all of the various associations and information, and be able to visualize all that as a series of connections so that you can interpret and understand where the potential relevance is and where the potential threat is, and build that all into a common security profile that allows you to get clear visibility into what you should be actually concerned about and who you should be concerned about. And the way we do that with cognitive, because cognitive quite literally just means how somebody thinks, is you use facts, and the facts are based on all of the unstructured data that you can bring into a cognitive system. It's natural language, and then you ask questions and you get answers. There is nothing more complex than this. This is the most simple way to understand what cognitive systems actually do. They use facts from natural language information, you ask questions, and you get answers based on those facts. And those answers can take multiple forms. It could be a list of search results, like you're doing a Google search. It could be a more definitive answer that is presented in the form of a series of passages with highlighted text to show you that the answer is in there. Or it could be simply an answer. What was the score of the home team's game last night? The answer was 7-1. So there's a lot of different ways you can get those answers back from a cognitive system, and the system has to be able to produce all three types of answers based on the level of complexity of the information and the desired output you want. But it has to base this on something. So it bases it on security information within the environment. It bases it on regulatory information and compliance data and corporate documents. It bases it on the type of industry the company is in and brand-specific materials and information. It bases it on sentiment. What are people saying? What are people emailing about? What are people posting about on social media? And how do they feel? Are they angry? Are they upset? Are they narcissistic? Are they self-centered? Are they confident? Are they unsure? And then finally, other key indicators, whether these are threat data feeds or industry-specific information about new attacks that are happening from other organizations or competitors or potentially nation states. So you take all this data, all of this becomes the facts of which the questions get answered by. Now, the way you would implement a cognitive system is actually with a three-layer model. You have to start with your technology foundation because this cognitive system has to have a basis to process data. You have to know what ways you want to operate on the information with, and you also need to know what you want to put into it. But how you figure that out is through your use cases. You can't just simply put in a cognitive system and expect it to do something. You have to have a basis or a reference point to use. And then you also have to understand how you want the workflow of this cognitive system to integrate with the rest of your organization. Do you want it to be part of the investigation of a cyber kill chain? Do you want it to be part of a traditional workflow of an IT team? Or do you want it to take a deeper involvement in your business and actually be a part of analysis around brand, competitive insights, threat actors, determining which documentation might be most relevant to different individuals based on current events or popular topics? All of this has to come together to become an effective deployment, and ultimately this three-layer visualization becomes what we would say our cognitive reference architecture. Now, just to give you a little bit of a deeper dive, because this can be a very abstract topic, so to put some more perspective and parameters around this, we really look at use cases. And the use cases could be anything from simply augmenting your security staff, so giving them the ability to do more rapid research into potential problems so that they can act more quickly, to fact-checking your environment against a certain compliance or framework to see how well you stand up, to more advanced things like understanding intention or motivation of an individual and looking at your own intellectual property, and even much more advanced capabilities like visual recognition, detecting a suspicious package or an individual that may be holding something that is suspect, or anything else in between. So these are just ideas of the types of things that cognitive systems can help either introduce or accelerate from a security perspective. Now, the other critical thing is that we talk about cognitive for security. There is, of course, security for cognitive, because cognitive systems still run on information networks, and so there has to be a framework in place to protect those systems. But then there's also, for folks that use internal search engines or for the big search providers, the ability to implement cognitive security to protect cognitive systems. And these are all areas that we are looking at, and these are all areas that need to be considered when we talk about cognitive security. And all of this ultimately plays into a framework. And the framework is you have to build on the basis of traditional security. These are all table stakes requirements for any regulatory environment or any framework. You have to have the basics around identity and governance, endpoint, networking, and information systems. But that needs to be in perspective and context to a specific industry, which also in turn needs to be professionally tuned and organized so that you can focus on the security indicators that are most relevant to you or your industry, and not just everything that's banging at your door. But in order to do that, you also have to understand what else exists in the internet and amongst your peers. And the only way you're going to do that is to integrate external threat data with the full stack. But the bad actors aren't trying to break into your security environment. They're trying to break into your data. And so you have to use the big data analytics that isn't typically part of security as a function of your security workflow. And because big data is traditionally unstructured, you need to have the cognitive element to help you understand what's going on and how to act based on the indicators that is being seen. Only with this full stack can you offer the maximum amount of possible protection for an environment. And this is really the thought process and the methodology. Now, the way we do this is really with three separate areas that all lead into one thing. So we talked about cognitive the whole time, and this is really about context and intent. But there's also an element of security intelligence that has to get incorporated into the broader scheme, because that gives you the indicators from a physical and information analytics standpoint. And then finally, understanding how all the relationships of people and phone numbers and devices and context and security telemetry feed together. And all of this creates deeper security insight. So cognitive security is about using unstructured data, natural language, as a function of critical security indicators to creating that deeper security insight. Hopefully this was informational and interesting, and we're happy to do deeper discussions with you in the future. Thank you.